Year 73 AD, the sun climbs over the Bay of Naples, casting gold across the vineyards that carpet the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. In the garden of a coastal villa, a woman kneels before a bronze basin, her reflection trembling in the water. Her name is Livia. For 6 days, she tasted something Roman law insisted she had no right to experience, the sensation of choosing her own direction. Now, as footsteps echo across the marble atrium behind her, that sensation evaporates like morning mist. Before we go further, if you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. It's incredible to think that people across continents are all drawn to the same haunting corners of history. If you're enjoying this journey into the past, hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep exploring these forgotten stories together. This moment, this morning in 73 AD, is about to become a public lesson. Because in the Roman Empire, a woman who fled enslavement didn't simply face punishment, she became punishment. Her body would be transformed into a walking decree, a living document that declared to every person who saw her, "This is what happens when you try to claim your own life." The Romans didn't invent cruelty, but they perfected something far more insidious. They bureaucratized it. They codified suffering into law, archived it in ledgers, and executed it with the dispassion of clerks stamping documents. When a woman escaped slavery in Rome, she wasn't just breaking a rule. She was challenging an entire cosmology, a worldview in which some human beings were legally classified as race, things, objects with no more autonomy than a plow or a clay jar. And the empire's response was calculated, systematic, and designed to ensure that her defiance would never inspire another soul to follow. The villa where Livia kneels belongs to Marcus Antonius Primus, a retired military tribune with estates across Campania. He owns 43 enslaved people. Livia is number 17 in his household ledger. That's how she's recorded, a number, a function, an entry between kitchen slave and wool spinner. She tried to reach the port at Putelli, perhaps hoping to board a merchant vessel, perhaps dreaming of disappearing into the anonymity of a distant province. She made it 12 miles. The slave hunters, fugitiveri, professional trackers who specialized in human pursuit found her sleeping in a roadside shrine. They dragged her back in iron manacles, and now Marcus Antonius Primus must decide which of Rome's 5 approved methods he will use to remind his household, and the neighborhood beyond, what happens to women who run. The Roman system for punishing female runaways wasn't born from spontaneous rage. It was engineered over centuries, refined through legal precedent, and justified by philosophers who never questioned whether slavery itself deserved to exist. Writers like Seneca acknowledged that enslaved people were human beings capable of virtue. Yet he never suggested abolishing the institution. Tacitus recorded slave punishments with the same neutral tone he used to describe Senate debates. Suetonius listed methods of torture alongside descriptions of imperial banquets, as if both were equally mundane features of Roman life. This wasn't ignorance. This was consensus. The entire apparatus of Roman power, from the Senate to the marketplace, rested on the assumption that some people were born to own and others were born to be owned. And when that assumption was challenged, even by a single woman fleeing in the night, the response had to be overwhelming, visible, and permanent. The first punishment Rome deployed was branding, stigmatizatio, a procedure so common that professional slave markers, stigmators, operated in every major city. These weren't thugs or sadists. They were licensed technicians, registered with municipal authorities, trained in the precise application of heated iron to human flesh. Their workshops stood near slave markets and wealthy estates, equipped with forges, iron rods, and bronze templates for carving letters. The process was industrial. When a fugitive woman was returned, her master could bring her to a stigmator the way a merchant might bring a damaged tool to a blacksmith. The stigmator selected an iron rod from the coals, waiting until the tip glowed white-hot, hot enough to destroy tissue instantly without causing excessive bleeding. The target was always the forehead. Roman law specified this location deliberately. Hair could grow over a scar on the scalp, cosmetics could obscure a mark on the cheek, but a brand on the forehead, especially one raised into thick scar tissue, remained visible from across a marketplace, a bathhouse, a crowded street. The most common inscription was FUG, shorthand for fugitiva, runaway. Other brands included fur, thief, or even full phrases like "Tin me ni fugiem," hold me lest I flee. These weren't metaphorical. They were literal instructions stamped into the skin, transforming a woman's face into a public service announcement. The pain was extraordinary. When heated metal meets living flesh, the water in the cells boils instantly. The skin splits, fat bubbles and smokes. Nerve endings fire signals so intense that the brain often shuts down, plunging the victim into unconsciousness. But the stigmator didn't stop. He pressed the iron for a count of 10, ensuring the wound would heal into a deep, permanent scar. The smell, witnesses reported, was unforgettable. Burning hair, charred skin, and something else, something that spectators struggled to name but recognized as fundamentally human. That scent lingered in the workshop for hours, a sensory echo of the woman's obliteration. After the branding, she was sent back to her master's household. No ointments, no bandages. The wound was left open, exposed to dust and flies. Infection was common. Some women developed fevers that lasted weeks. Others lost portions of their foreheads to necrosis, leaving craters of dead tissue. But survival was expected. The brand had to last. It had to be seen. Every time she entered a room, every time she walked through the atrium or served wine at a dinner party, guests would see the mark and understand immediately. This woman tried to escape. This woman failed. This woman belongs to someone who had the power to carve his authority into her face. The psychological damage extended beyond the physical wound. In Roman culture, a woman's appearance was tightly regulated. Beauty, modesty, and decorum were linked to social value. A branded woman was stripped of all three. She became a figure of disgust, pity, or worse, indifference. Other enslaved people saw the brand and internalized the message, "Run, and this is your future." The stigma didn't just punish the individual, it terrorized an entire class of people into submission. And the empire recorded these brandings in municipal ledgers, tracking how many fugitives were marked each year, noting the names of stigmators and the fees they charged. This was governance. This was law. This was Rome. But branding was only the beginning. Some masters wanted more than a permanent mark. They wanted their slaves' humiliation to become a public spectacle, a daily performance that reinforced the hierarchy every time a neighbor walked past the door. For this, they used chains. The woman would be shackled at the ianoir, the threshold of the house, the symbolic border between private domesticity and the public street. Here she was transformed into architecture, a living ornament designed to communicate her master's power and her own objection. The chains were never comfortable. Iron manacles, often undersized, bit into the wrists and ankles until the skin split. Circulation slowed, fingers turned blue, then black. Some women lost digits to gangrene. The shackles were anchored to the doorframe or embedded in the floor, preventing movement beyond a few feet. She could sit, she could kneel, but she could not leave. She could not hide. The ianoir was one of the most trafficked spaces in a Roman household. Clients arrived for morning salutatio, vendors delivered goods, neighbors passed by on their way to the forum. Every person who entered or exited saw her, and that was the point. She became a warning, a piece of human propaganda stationed at the boundary between order and chaos. Passers-by could see her from the street. Children threw scraps of rotten fruit. Merchants spat at her feet. Other enslaved people, ordered by their own masters to insult her, delivered rehearsed taunts. Refusal meant taking her place. The elements were merciless. In summer, the sun blistered exposed skin. In winter, rain soaked her clothes until hypothermia set in. She had no shelter, no reprieve. Food and water were withheld, sometimes for days. Dehydration cracked her lips. Hunger hollowed her body. Some women fainted repeatedly, only to be revived with buckets of cold water so the spectacle could continue. The cruelty was ambient, environmental. It required no active supervision. The chains did the work. Gravity did the work. Time did the work. And the most devastating aspect of this punishment was its intimacy. She wasn't sent away. She remained in the household, visible to the family who owned her, to the other enslaved people who shared her fate, to the children who would grow up seeing her as a permanent fixture of the doorway. This was pedagogy through architecture. The Romans understood that power is most effective when it's visible, routine, and inescapable. Chaining a woman at the threshold turned her into a monument to obedience, a statue carved from living flesh. They could not look away, and that was the entire purpose. For women who survived branding and chaining, for those whose defiance still flickered despite the iron and the scars, Rome had a third option, the arena. Damnatio ad bestia's condemnation to the beasts was not reserved for violent criminals. It was applied to runaway slaves, especially those who attempted escape multiple times or inspired others to flee. The charge was simple: desertion. The sentence was death by public entertainment. This wasn't execution, it was theater. The condemned woman was dragged into the amphitheater, stripped of clothing, and released into the sand. Around her, tens of thousands of spectators filled stone tiers, their faces shadowed by awnings dyed purple and gold. At the far end of the arena, iron gates creaked open. Behind those gates, lions, leopards, bears, animals starved for days to guarantee aggression. The choreography was meticulous. Arena officials, editors, planned these executions like stage productions. They selected animals based on temperament and hunger. They timed the release to maximize drama. They even staged mythological reenactments, forcing the condemned to play roles in twisted parodies of divine punishment. A woman might be tied to a post and dressed as deers, the mythological queen torn apart by a bull. Another might be chained in the center of the arena while a lion circled, the crowd roaring with anticipation. The goal was never justice. The goal was spectacle. The transformation of human suffering into commodity that entertained the masses and reminded everyone watching what happened to those who defied the social order. When the animals were released, the crowd didn't fall silent. They cheered. They wagered. Martial, the Roman poet, described spectators betting on how long a woman would remain standing. Whether she would scream, which limb the beast would tear first, her death became a data point in a gambling pool, her agony reduced to odds and entertainment. Some women tried to run, The sand, soaked with blood from earlier executions, slowed their steps. Some collapsed immediately, paralyzed by terror. Others fought, clawing at the animals with bare hands, their resistance only prolonging the inevitable. The beasts, trained by hunger and instinct, tore into flesh with efficiency. Limbs were severed, organs spilled onto the sand. The woman's screams blended with the roar of the crowd until both became a single, inhuman sound. Between executions, enslaved workers dragged bodies away with iron hooks. Blood was raked into the sand, mixing with the earth until the ground itself seemed to pulse with death. Fresh waves of condemned prisoners were brought in, and the spectacle continued. For the audience, this was leisure. For the woman in the sand, it was obliteration. And the most horrifying detail, this was legal, it was approved, it was celebrated. Emperors sponsored these games. Senators attended, families brought their children. The arena didn't exist on the margins of Roman society. It was the society, the place where Roman values, hierarchy, spectacle, obedience were performed and reaffirmed through ritualized violence. Consider the case of Bassa, a name preserved in a fragmentary inscription found near Capua. Bassa was an enslaved woman who worked in a textile workshop. She fled in 89 AD during the reign of Domitian. She was captured after 8 days. Her master, unwilling to settle for branding, brought her case before a local magistrate. The magistrate, citing her repeated attempts to escape, sentenced her to the arena. On the day of her execution, Bassa was led through the streets in chains, past the workshop where she had labored for years, past the market where she had once imagined freedom might be possible. She was pushed into the sand, the gates opened. A leopard, lean and starved, emerged. Bassa stood frozen. The crowd screamed. The leopard pounced. In less than a minute, it was over. Her body was dragged away. The next condemned prisoner was brought in. The games continued. Bassa's death was recorded in a ledger, a single line noting the date, the crime, and the method of execution. No mention of her thoughts, no record of her dreams, just a name, a number, and the word damnatio. She became a statistic in an empire that treated human life as an administrative category, and the crowd, having watched her die, filed out of the arena and returned to their lives. They bought bread, they attended dinners, they slept soundly, because in Rome this was normal, this was entertainment, this was justice. For those the empire wanted not just to kill, but to erase, there was one final punishment, the mines damnatio in metallum. This sentence was considered worse than immediate death. It was death by installment, a slow annihilation of body, mind, and identity. Women sent to the mines were expected never to return. The mines themselves were subterranean labyrinths carved into mountains across the empire. Spain, Sardinia, Noricum, Dacia. They extracted gold, silver, lead, and mercury, resources that funded Rome's military campaigns and monumental architecture. But the true cost of those resources was measured in human lives. The conditions were apocalyptic. Tunnels stretched for miles, so narrow that workers crawled on their bellies. Ventilation was non-existent. The air was thick with dust, metallic fumes, and the stench of decay. Torches provided the only light, their flames guttering in the toxic atmosphere. Workers hammered rock for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. There were no rest periods, no medical care, no reprieve. For enslaved women, the mines were uniquely brutal. They faced constant assault from guards. No laws governed behavior underground, no witnesses, no accountability. Mercury mines were the worst. Prolonged exposure caused teeth to loosen and fall out. Gums rotted. Skin developed ulcers that never healed. Tremors made it impossible to hold tools. Vision blurred. Some women went mad, hallucinating in the dark, their screams echoing through the tunnels until guards dragged them into side passages and left them to die. Cave-ins were routine. When a tunnel collapsed, the trapped were abandoned. Administrators didn't organize rescues. They wrote off the dead, reassigned the living, and resumed production. Those buried alive clawed at rock until their fingers bled, suffocating in the darkness. Their bodies remained where they fell, decomposing alongside the ore they had spent their lives extracting. Roman officials kept meticulous records of mine production. They tracked output, costs, and losses. But losses didn't mean people. It meant labor units, replaceable resources that could be replenished with the next shipment of condemned prisoners. A woman sent to the mines didn't have a name. She had a production quota. When she died, her body wasn't buried. It was discarded, left to rot in a side tunnel, or dumped into a ravine. She disappeared from the world above as if she had never existed. And that was the point. Damnatio in metallum wasn't just punishment. It was erasure, the removal of a person from history, memory, and the record of the living. The historians who recorded Rome's punishments, Suetonius, Tacitus, Seneca, and Pliny the Elder, wrote with cold steadiness that feels almost unreal. They described brandings as calmly as tax reforms and listed arena killings beside construction plans, as though violence were simple paperwork. None condemned the system. Seneca came closest, hinting that enslaved people held virtue and deserved kindness, yet his kindness remained a master's favor, not a right. Rome shaped him, enriched him, and he never imagined dismantling its machinery. That silence exposes Rome's core. The empire didn't merely allow cruelty, it engineered it, turning pain into procedure. Senators crafted laws. Magistrates enforced them. Stigmators burned marks into skin, and editors staged deaths for crowds hungry for spectacle. Merchants sold tickets. Families watched. Children learned early that some lives could be discarded. The monuments still rise. The Colosseum dazzles tourists, its arches admired while its shadows stay unnamed. Beneath modern floors and walkways lies a truth no brochure polishes. The blood-soaked sand is gone, the branding rooms dissolved, the mines caved in, yet echoes cling to the ruins. The women who were branded, chained, erased, left no inscriptions, but their pain threads through Rome's foundations, its aqueducts, its roads, its temples. Livia, kneeling in a garden in 73 AD, knew none of this. She heard footsteps closing in and felt freedom slipping still. Her fate was built to wound her and to frighten others into obedience. Rome's cruelty was never an accident. It was the system, and its warning endures. A society is judged not by monuments, but by the suffering it chooses to accept.